Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Perspective with Viv podcast. My name is Viv, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is titled R for Rebirth, and I have a special guest with me, Laura Giles. I'm going to read Laura's bio just before we begin our conversation so you know more about her. So, Laura has spent over 20 years helping trauma survivors live unfettered, authentic lives with experience in a maximum security prison, psychiatric hospital, courts, and private practice. She has given even the most hard to help individuals toward healing quickly and naturally. Her work isn't therapy, it's highly focused, is a quick release process designed to clear blocked energy at its roots using metaphorical, somatic energy and linguistic techniques. Laura helps clients bypass the conscious mind to resolve unconscious wounds with ease. Hello, Laura. Nice to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Let me start with a precise question. How would you define ego death in a way that's accessible to those new to the concept?
I think ego death is the result of understanding that you are part of the whole. So when you see yourself as an individual and isolated and alone and the world is sitting on your shoulders like you have to take care of everything and you have to control everything. That's a real different way of moving in the world. And once you shift to a part of your everything, then that individuality, that sense of aloneness, all of that goes away. And it becomes much easier to be detached. And I don't mean in a way that I don't care about anything, but that, you know, things happen. It's just a part of nature and how the things roll out, but it's not about you. You're something different, you're something bigger, you're something more awesome than the things that happen to you or the things that are going on. So like war and rape and child
Mm,
trafficking and all of that. All that's horrible,
yeah.
but we don't have to live under the weight of it and the darkness of it all. We're bigger than that, we're more than that, and that's how I view ego death. Life
Okay.
just becomes so much easier and more enjoyable.
Very interesting. I think my perspective of ego death, the way I've felt it or seen it, is saying goodbye to an older version of yourself,
Mhm.
closing cycles to past versions, past habits, and past ways of being to allow a new one. But I think it's sort of like a transition as well. It's like holding a funeral, being in like the in between the old you and the new you. That's how I see it. What do you
Mhm.
think?
I think it's all a part of the same thing.
Mm,
I think that so I'm a big picture person,
okay.
and I zoom out like way out. So I think that's part of the same picture, just more of a closer zoomed view.
Fair enough. Okay. So, why do you think experiencing an ego death is essential for personal and spiritual transformation?
Because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the day to day crap that goes on. If somebody's driving aggressively, you can take that personally. If your boss is mean to
Hmm.
you, your partner's not loving you the way you want to be loved, we can get bogged down in that and think of, oh, this is all about me. I have to do this, this, this. I have to have these goals. And really, the big picture of it all is you don't have to do any of that. All of that can happen and it has nothing to do with you. It doesn't have anything to do with your inner peace, the way that you show up in the world or the way that you share your gifts with the world. But none of that is you.
Interesting. So, would you define us as like a spirit, a soul observing? Or how do you describe us if we wanted to say, who are we really?
I think we're consciousness.
Mm,
And we're moving about the physical world in a body. So we have the limitations of the body, we have the
yeah.
limitations of physics. And then because we're in this, we can forget that we're consciousness.
Very
And
true.
yeah, the physical just becomes the reality when it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah. I think one thing that you just said previously that stood out to me was when you said you zoom out. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that is important because I do tarot readings. And one of
Hmm.
the cards that comes up sometimes when it's calling for me to zoom out is the Eight of Swords. And it's about having an expanded perspective on life. Because when
Hmm.
you zoom out, you're able to see the bigger picture. And I think we get caught up in little things that prevent us from seeing the bigger plan. Many people fear losing their sense of identity. What are the most common resistances people face in this process, and how can they move through them?
I think we're always being defined from the time that we're babies.
Hmm.
People thrust these definitions on us, these parameters, these labels on us. And because we're little, we don't know how to be in this world. We're kind of learning as we go. We accept them. These people have authority over us. We don't have any control. We can't feed ourselves. We can't walk. We can't talk. We can't do anything. And we rely on them for survival. And so we accept the parameters that they put on us. And so to have somebody take that away and say, no, this is not who you are, it is threatening. It's like being threatened with a bullet. We don't
Mhm.
want to lose our sense of identity. And
Yeah.
I think we have to do that in order to be who we really are. Because all the labels that I have, yes, okay, I am a therapist, I am a female, I'm an American, I'm all of these things, but not really.
Hmm. They're just labels.
Yes.
Interesting. I understand that. And I connect with that because when you have labels over yourself, whether it's you being giving that, and most times it's society that gives us a lot more labels than we give ourselves, because I think that society contributes to the way we see ourselves.
Yes.
So if society says we're all these things, and then okay, we embody those labels as who we really are, breaking
Yes.
out of that box causes that kind of ego death. It causes the cognitive dissonance because you've been told you're one thing, but as life happens, as you evolve unconsciously, you start to strip away old parts of you that no longer resonate with this version of you that is blooming. And that's
Yes.
where those labels or the constructs around those labels start to fall apart because we start to ask ourselves, why am I referring to myself as this person? Why did I see myself as this person? And I think a very interesting label is the label of the black sheep.
Hmm.
So for me, being labeled a black sheep, I don't take it as something that is negative. But I know when I first felt that way, being seen as the wild child, the wild one, it kind of had that negative connotation. But through that understanding of self or through my self-love journey, I started to ask myself, is this really a negative thing, or have I been made to feel that this is a negative label? What does this label entail? Has it limited me in the way I show up in society and how I show up for myself? So I think once we come to a certain level of knowing ourselves, we're able to deconstruct labels around us. Labels aren't bad for sure, but we're able to not keep ourselves in a box. That's what I feel.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the black sheep because most of my clients are black sheep.
Mm.
I attract people who have had trouble healing elsewhere. So I say that I help the hard to help. And I think one of the reasons why they are hard to help is because the people who are helping them are trying to put them in the mainstream box. And
Mm.
that's not who they are. That's not where they are. They're here to be rebels and revolutionaries and to be themselves. And they're resisting that. And I think when we embody the black sheep and do make it a positive thing, then it helps us to step into our power. So I love the black sheep. And I think the black sheep is a very strong, vital, important, necessary aspect of the kaleidoscope of the human journey.
I definitely agree. And there's this saying, not recently, but there's this saying that the black sheep becomes the goat. Have you heard that?
I have it.
So they said the black sheep becomes the goat, which is the greatest of all time. So I kind of agree because when you are ostracized or isolated or made to feel a certain way, you are giving the opportunity to step into your power because I felt I had no choice because it seemed like my environment wasn't agreeing with who I was as a
Yes.
person. So I had
Yes.
to define myself and ensure my environment adjusted to that, and that was through playing with how powerful I was. We're all afraid of our power when we first start out, if we're not really tended to properly. But I think one thing I did like was the fact that it did thrust me into being in my power. And
Hmm.
I'm still blooming, but I'm enjoying the process. So I definitely
Hmm.
agree with you. So my next question, what does living clean and dying clean mean to you? And
Oh,
what
that's
does that look
fantastic.
like in practice? Thank you.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about living clean, I'm talking about cleaning up your mess as you go.
Mm.
I've done a lot of work in past life regressions. I've been doing
Oh, I
regression
love
for over
that.
30 years, both
Okay.
myself and with other people.
Interesting.
And so I see the patterns of life and death. And I
Mm.
also work in death as a home funeral officiant
Oh,
and
okay.
facilitator. So literally with life and death. Yeah. And the process is that what you don't clean up comes with you. There's no get out of jail free card. There's no free lunch.
I agree.
Karma is a thing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a punitive way. It's just this is our energy body, and we take
Hmm.
that energy body with us. So when we come back in the physical again, that's still the energy that we have. So if you're not cleaning that stuff up, the burden just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. But even if we look at it from a perspective of a single life, so let's say that I was bullied as a child, and I was, um,
Mm.
then as I develop, everything that happens to me, I'm going to see through that lens of bullying. And it just solidifies that I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, or however you're interpreting that thing. Maybe it's I have to be the hero that saves people from this. So, however you're dealing with that, that just gets stronger and stronger and part of your identity. And it creates more and more karma and more. You attract more of that. So, if you're healing as you go, you die clean, you're passing nothing on to yourself, your future self. You're
So
passing
true.
nothing on to your descendants. And it allows you to choose. So, you're not a victim of your trauma.
Mm. I totally agree with that. I also have this interest in past lives because of that, because of the karma we bring from past lives into this one that we're currently living. And I also like to explore the concept of how it also comes in the form of baggage around people that we used to know reincarnating with us,
Mm-hmm.
and we reliving possibly certain storylines that we didn't get to finish on a
Mm-hmm.
positive note, or we replay karmic loops that if we do the same thing, we perpetuate that same storyline that we lived in the past lives. Like, once, for example, again, let's say being an intuitive woman in a traditional culture, you would get ostracized, you would get attacked, and it's sort of reminiscent to another past life that you had. But
Mm-hmm.
in this life, you do have that choice, which I believe is something you're talking about, living clean. Am I going to repeat the cycle of staying silent and not expressing myself and not living in my truth? Or am I going to fight back, be a revolutionary, use my voice, make an impact, live in my fullest capacity? I would, because I want to live clean. That's my interpretation of it. I want to release that burden and karma of feeling like I have to be stifled in every life that I live.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think that having the experience of past life regression is something that everybody should do
yeah,
because
same.
it does allow you to zoom out and see the patterns. Because when you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. You can't see the choices, especially if there's trauma around that, and there often is. But once you do the past life regression, you're in it, so you can
Yeah,
feel the impact of it, but you're also kind of dissociated. So you can see it from a third person perspective. And it's easier then to say, why did I do that? Or let me
definitely.
let that go now, or do
Yeah.
something that allows you to heal that energy and move on in a clean way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, would you say it's the same thing with dying clean? Like, because we live clean, then we can die clean. We're not carrying anything to the next life. That's what you mean, right?
Yes, yes. So I had the experience of dying.
Oh.
And I think it's really interesting because you hear these stories about the white light in the tunnel and people
Mm-hmm.
greening you and all of that. And I think that that is somebody's true experience, but I don't think everybody's experience is the same. I think it has to do with your energy and what you're carrying. My
Okay.
experience was nothing like that.
What was
It
yours like?
was, because I have this big picture view, it was much bigger than that and universal. And I could feel the allness of everything, which I do in day to day life as well. And I that really proved to me the value of dying clean because I didn't have all those earthly temptations and oh, I've got to
Regrets
finish
and
back. I got to go back and do this. I did
mm,
none of that was true.
wow,
Yeah.
that's profound. Wow. And so, when you woke back up, how did you feel? Like, what was the first feeling? Like, did you have that thing that people normally have, like, oh, let me continue living? Although you did just mention that you didn't feel any regrets or anything, but
No.
was there a difference in your countenance when you came to, or you just continued living how you were normally living?
It took a while to get back in my body. So my body was
Oh,
cold. It was really
really?
cold.
Wow.
And it had a hard time breathing. It was like I couldn't even remember how to live in a body anymore,
Oh,
how to function, and I had to think about breathing a lot, um, because breath is life, and I kept saying, "Okay, breathe more deeply, you're not getting enough air," and that went on for days. So I was definitely in a liminal space between here and there for a while before I fully came back into my body. And then the more that I came back into my body, it became easier and easier to forget that other way of being, kind of. I mean, it's not like it was when I was there, but when you're there, that all of the stuff that we think about and think is important, none of
Nothing.
that matters. It's just so small and so petty. And it's hard to come back because it's like, do I want to be that limited again?
Yeah, I was about to ask. Yeah, okay. Can
Yeah.
I ask you, so does that mean that you were like in a coma for a couple of days?
Oh, I wasn't in a coma, but I guess you could say that.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, I mean, I just want to understand better. So, were you dead, and like you were floating over your body, or
And I was gone. I wasn't floating over my body. I had a vague awareness of my body, but not really.
okay,
I wasn't there. I wasn't there at
interesting.
all. I was
Wow,
gone.
wow, that is so profound. Thank you for sharing. Whew. So, how does living clean help us cultivate a sense of deep connection and fulfillment to our lives?
That's really interesting because I think when people think of being connected, it is in a way with attachment and
Mm,
possession,
mm-hmm.
and but it's actually the opposite. I think it's when you detach and let go and don't have ownership and possession and don't have ego attachments to things like, do I am I going to get
Very
this
true.
job? Does this guy like me? Or that's when you have the
Mm.
true freedom and the ability to be more here and more attached and living from your guts and your feelings and having a savory sensuous experience of it. And then when it's over, it's over, and it's just like, okay, I don't have to do that again, but if I do again, it's cool, which keeps you in the moment and mindful and then willing to have the next experience that comes along. So to me, that's what clean is. It's just
Mm.
about being fresh at zero. Anything can happen. I don't owe anybody anything. I don't have to do this thing. I don't have to go that way. I don't have to nothing. It's just like being a baby. Every day is new and everything's about possibilities and choices.
Okay. I think you really did have me when you said that you see things from a zoomed out place, because it's refreshing to hear your perspective on these things. Because if there's one thing I know about this human existence, it's the realization that detachment is really a superpower for me.
Yeah.
I've never, my life, when I started practicing detachment, which was in 2024, drastically different from all these years that I've been living, to the point where I was like, am I living right? Like, I cannot believe life is actually moving in a way where I love the rhythm. There are like ebbs and flows, but I'm good, I'm grounded, I'm approaching everything with neutrality. I'm not taking things to heart like I would
Mhm.
before. It makes me even more discerning. But I think
Mhm.
the main thing is that I do feel freer, and I feel
Yeah.
so free. And I like that. And I like the fact that I no longer feel like a victim of my circumstances or environment. Things can happen, but I know myself a lot more now to be able to handle whatever comes. And that was really where I was giving away my power back in the day. So
Mhm.
that's helped to like close those holes, and make me feel more grounded in myself. So thanks
Mhm.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, how can someone intentionally practice dying before they die in daily life?
So I know that sounds kind of hard, right? I mean, dying is
Mm,
such a final and severe kind of thing, but actually, we're dying all the time. If you
mm,
look at the seasons, the seasons die. Fall is the decline and winter is the death and the hibernation and rebirth process. So we're always doing it. We're moving in and out of relationships all the time. We're changing jobs all the time. So death
yeah.
is really just transition.
Mm,
And I think when we mindfully transition, then we start to get the idea of, oh, this isn't so scary. It's new. I don't know what's happening next. That's part of the fun. You know, I love the unpredictability because death is a doorway and it's a leap of faith. You don't know what's going to be on the other side. You hope that you're going to land solidly, and we always do, but you don't know. And that fear is what keeps people from doing it.
mm,
And if you look at your life overall, though, we've all died a million times. In my DBT group, we just had some people graduate, and we had a graduation ceremony. Everybody said goodbye. Everybody said what they wanted to say. And it was a way of closing well. So I think part of that dying well is doing that, letting go, saying your goodbyes, letting it be the final thing. And it was such a beautiful thing. and it had closure. We don't do closure, and death is about closure.
Very interesting, honestly. So, after shedding parts of the ego, there's often a feeling of emptiness. How do you advise people to navigate this in a healthy way before they transition into this new person they're becoming?
Go through the grief process.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. People don't really like to grieve. They don't really like to embrace that process of grieving. And I can see how that hinders the transformation process of a person. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. So my dog died 2 years ago,
Oh,
and
I'm sorry to hear.
I consciously grieved that death. I set
Hmm.
aside 30 days. I
Oh.
committed to the 30 days. And if I needed longer, I would go longer. But I knew that I wanted to do 30 days. And part of that was wearing black. Black is how
Oh.
I felt. I felt heavy. I wanted to signal to the world, okay, if I'm not myself now, then, you don't have to ask me, but black, this is where I am. And a lot of people didn't pick up on that, but I'm not a person that really wears black, but I really felt
Hmm.
the black. And the other thing I did was, as you're walking and thinking about things, it helps
Sorry,
your
you said the other thing you started to do was.
hike.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. As you're walking and you're thinking about things, you're helping your brain and your body to process.
Hmm.
So I wasn't always thinking about her, but she was in there, and there'd be times when, just stuff would just erupt, and it allowed me the space to feel what I was feeling. So sometimes I wasn't feeling anything, and that was okay. But other times, because I put aside that time for it, it did come out, and I felt my feelings. And then when they're gone, they were gone, and that's how all feelings are. It's
Hmm.
energy; it dissipates if you give it the space to do that. So by the time the end of the 30 days came, I really was good.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So, I want us to move into speaking about shadow work and being a wounded healer. And my first question is, how does one's own suffering become a source of wisdom and healing for others?
I think it's always that. So if you look at astrology and you look at the Chiron in your chart, that's going to
Oh,
tell you what wounds that you're healing and what wounds you're carrying. That is the key to your greatness.
wow.
And once you
Yes.
get through that and use that as
Oof.
power, then you can blossom into your fullness. So, for people who don't know the myth of Chiron, people do know him as the wounded healer because he was shot in the arrow with a poison arrow by Hercules, and they think, oh, that's his wound, because he was a healer, but he couldn't cure himself. But that's not his wound. Our wound is a birth wound. His wound was that his mother was raped. So he was conceived in rape, and then he was abandoned at birth by both of his parents. He never met his father.
Oh,
He met
wow.
his mom at birth, and then he was adopted by Apollo. That was the thing that he needed to overcome. So we all have this. Check your Chiron in your astrological chart. You'll find out what yours is.
Yes, I know mine. Mine is Chiron in Virgo in
Uh-huh.
my 11th house. Oh, big healing, big healing. And there's an eclipse. There was an eclipse this morning in
Yeah.
Virgo. Trust me. I'm going through it. I'm enjoying it. Like you said, bigger picture, like widening that lens. That's really
Hmm.
helping me and detachment. So thank you for sharing that because a lot of people don't know how meaningful Chiron is in your natal
Yeah.
charts. But I loved your answer for this question for sure. It really hit home. Can you share your perspective on what it really means to do shadow work?
Hopefully, we are doing shadow work all the time.
Mm,
So the shadow is the stuff that we can't see.
yeah.
But if you are paying attention, if you're tuning in, doing some journaling, doing some meditation, doing something, you're going to see glimpses of that. If you're in your body, your body might just feel sad one day and you don't really know why, or you might be nervous or just have some feelings and you don't really know why. All of that is peaks of shadow work.
Yeah.
And shadow work really is making all that conscious, like, okay, what's going on here? So that you can use all of that to grow, because the shadow is the stuff that we resist. A lot of it has to do with shame. Nobody wants to see that they're ugly or jealous or these things that we give labels to that we don't like. But everything is whole. For every yin, there is a yang. And if you're not embracing the wholeness, you're not being whole. All of that's part of your power. And which way you use the thing, whatever it is a choice.
So true. So true. Thank you for answering that. Wow. Um 1 minute, because sometimes on the podcast, like when I'm having conversations with guests, they really speak to my heart chakra, and I'm like, I feel my chest expanding, and I'm like, wow, these are all the things I really needed to hear today. So thank you for that. My next question is, many people are afraid to face their wounds and their feelings. What are some first steps to safely begin this process?
I would find some sort of body work.
Mm, okay.
That could be yoga, that could be qigong, it could be being in what's it called? Being in movement, being in motion, something like that. Feldenkrais, Traeger. A lot of people are dissociated, and your body is a gigantic tool that can help you to tune into what you're not seeing. If you're not embodied, you're going to be very limited in how far you can go.
Very true. I was listening to a podcast yesterday that was speaking on embodiment, and the guest said, if you're not embodied with yourself, then you're making space for other things to embody you or to peek into that space that you're not filling up in your body. Do you
Mhm.
agree?
Hmm.
Okay, no.
I'm not resonating with that, but I think if
Okay.
you're not embodied, then your energy body, your aura is what I call holy, and you
Okay.
can start to feel other people's things and not have any integrity with yourself. It makes it harder for you to connect with yourself
Yeah,
because everything's coming in and everything
definitely.
can dysregulate you.
Yes, exactly. And I feel that's what the guest was trying to explain. It's definitely me that made it lost in translation, because when I heard that, and even you answering this question, I remember the time when I wasn't embodied and I felt like I felt everybody's energy in
Yeah.
my energy field. Oh gosh. And that's why they always talk about energetic hygiene. It's so
Yes.
important. They say
Yes.
you should be spiritually cleansing every day. You should do
Yes.
energetic hygiene techniques, like clearing your aura, using your grounding cord. At the time when I was growing up and I was a teenager, that was the time when I was the most disembodied. I wasn't in my body. I felt like I was floating outside my body. I felt like I didn't like myself. My body felt heavier because of the energies of everybody else around me, especially the projections of insecurities of the people around me.
Mhm.
So I was so much heavier. And now that I've done shadow work a lot, because I'm a Scorpio rising, everything is
Mm.
about shadow work for me. It's like I now know that it was hard to really ground I would like to say my consciousness inside my body, because I could only identify with heavy energy.
Mhm.
My energy felt lighter. Everything about when me being in my power felt light, that my brain will sort of confuse it. Like if it's light, I can't see it. If it's
Mhm.
heavy, then I can feel it and it's meaningful.
Mhm.
So I had to like rewire my thinking to let me know that if it's heavy, it's not meant for you. That density is in yours. If it's light, that's you. And that you can't really see it because of how light it is, but you can feel it, and you can feel that it feels more powerful than the other energies you've been feeling. So that really changed, or my shadow work really enabled me to know what was mine and what isn't mine. And that's so important in energy work.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
interesting because I'm a Scorpio rising as well, and
Okay.
Scorpio goes into dark places. Scorpio
Yep.
likes the things that nobody likes. They like
Mm-hmm.
death and the occult and
Yes.
sex and
Yes.
but for me, the Scorpio rising has actually led me into that. So I'm
Mm.
I'm real curious about all that, and I especially when I was younger would study abnormal psychology and what makes people do
Oh.
what they do and serial killers and all of that because I think
Mm.
that owning that darkness is powerful. So it's all the same energy. So let's say that I have this real desire to work with the dead.
Okay.
I think that life and death are partners. So
Yeah.
it can help me to have a greater appreciation of life. So when you
Yes.
incorporate the yin and the yang versus making it a either or, then I think it that's just whoo, the level of power and understanding and appreciation grows because what the shadow is the stuff that we don't acknowledge, the stuff that we don't want to be
Yes.
a part of. So
Definitely.
I'm not a murderer, but I can say I understand why people would do that. I'm
I
not
get
a
that.
rapist.
Yeah.
But in exploring myself, I have this energy in me. I have this potential in me. I can understand it. And therefore, it makes me more compassionate towards somebody else. And I think it makes it more likely that I'm not going to do that thing because I see it as a choice, not a compulsion or a label or something I have to live up to.
Hmm. I hear you. I resonate with with what you said about, psychology. I wanted to know how people's minds work and the
Hmm.
dark and the occult. For me, I've always said I'm a shadow girl, and that's why even with this podcast, I've always made it a space for shadow work, like being that it's not all love and light. What is that aspect of you that as a woman society would shun? Is it the fact that you're so outspoken, or that you express your anger healthily, or you're bold in your sensuality, those things? So I
Hmm.
love the fact that I have a lot of placements in Scorpio, but I love when I'm able to connect with somebody else that is willing to speak about the darker aspects of life, the subconscious, the unconscious. And that's why you saying you have this relationship between life and death,
Hmm.
I think it's a very interesting. It's from understanding your perspective that made me feel like, yeah, this is something profound, because we talk about shadow work a lot. We talk about ego death, but I've never likened death while living. Do you get
Mm.
me? So having that in my head now, there's more of a synergy in the way I think just from
Hmm.
this conversation, because I'm like, okay, yes, there's shadow work, there's death, but how can you incorporate life and death as it goes, like a cycle, while you're living, while you're alive? And I
Hmm.
think that, yeah, it could change my approach to how I see things.
Hmm.
Definitely.
I think when you do past life regression, you go through death over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And every life is not a good life. Some of them are really horrible. Either you're victimized horribly or you're the perpetrator. And
Yeah.
when you see yourself in all of these um, different ways, it is shadow work, and you have to come to grips to this is me. This is how I showed up, and the only way to come out the other side is through acceptance.
Oh,
If
yeah.
I was the so in one of my past lives, I was a thief. And that wasn't so bad. I could live with that. I mean, he wasn't a
Okay.
nice guy by any means, but nobody wants to be a thief. But the thing that motivated me to not do that is I fell in love with this girl. I thought she was just the most beautiful thing. I wanted to deserve her and to shower her with all good things. And I ended up being able to do that. So I got my life together and I wooed
Okay.
her. She said yes. We set up a little household. I thought this was going to be my happily ever after. And she ended up being a shrew. She made me miserable. Nothing
Oh
was
my
ever good enough. She just
goodness.
wanted more and more. She was really judgmental. And
Oh
then she
wow.
died in childbirth. So we were not even like a year into our marriage. And rather
Oh.
than being like, oh gosh, I'm free, I held on to that bitterness to my last day.
Oh
That
wow.
is not who I am today, but going
Hmm.
through that made me never want to embody that energy again.
I
So even though
understand.
it's not me, that's a potential. I've been there. I've done
Yes.
that. And so
Yeah.
doing that shadow work helps me to say, okay, I get that, and that's not a choice I'm making today.
Yes.
And
It's not a choice. Yeah.
yeah, but I also have compassion for that because I lived it
Mm.
in that
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. That's profound,
Mhm.
definitely. So, how can people transform their deepest wounds, not only in present life, but past lives, into a source of strength and purpose?
I think with acceptance, what
Okay.
helps me in that is accepting it is what it is, and loving myself anyway. So I've had other past life experiences that were a lot darker than that. I mean, that was pretty mild compared to some of
Mm,
them. But if you
okay.
do enough work, you're going to see yourself as a demon. That's just part
That's
of it,
funny. Yeah.
because of wholeness. We all have every potential, and
Yeah.
you've got to say, "And I'm okay." If you do any sort of ancestral work, you're going to see that your ancestors were demons. And I don't mean literally demons, but there's a lot of bad characters in there. And that is you,
Mm,
that is in your DNA. And it's got
but
to
it's
be
a
a point.
choice.
Yeah, it's got to be okay. It's got
Mm,
not that the things that they did were okay, but it's just a place of acceptance and non-judgmental. Yes, that's what it was. And I'm still good. I'm still whole. I'm still a lovable creature. I have that choice. And then just choose to be the lighter side.
yeah, I definitely agree. Although, um, I've realized with ancestral work and, just studying roots and everything, that what I've been afraid of the most has actually been our greatest strength.
Mm.
And it's beautiful to realize, because I remember not feeling like I was expressing myself to my fullest potential when I knew what I wanted to say and how I wanted to act. But I felt like that side of me was bad, because obviously it's not a friendly face, it's not the person that is trying to keep the peace, but the person that is trying to incite war, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
But I think one thing that I've loved a lot about shadow work, and it's that acceptance of myself in my entirety, what I like about myself, what I may not like, because it's sort of like something that it can be seen as a bad quality, but isn't really a bad quality.
Mhm.
Utilizing all of that and turning it into good, or using it for good. I had a lot of shame around not being a nice girl, quote unquote, which I'm happy that I've grown out of, because I'm very expressive with my anger. I'm very real and straightforward about things. I'm also autistic, so I like to be honest about how I feel about things. I would say what's on my mind. I don't like to sugarcoat. And growing up, I felt villainized, even though I don't see myself as a victim. I felt villainized for being a woman that wasn't like the other women that I knew, the one that would fight for justice, the one that would stand up for herself. But I think one thing that I've come to terms with most especially is that I do accept myself for who I am, and I'm okay with everything that makes me me. It
Mhm.
took a while to get here, but yeah, I'm happy about that. So definitely I can resonate with what you said about acceptance.
Yeah, and I'm
My,
what when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about everything. So a lot of my clients struggle with things like addiction, alcohol, but it could be sex addiction, it could be anything, and a lot of them are cutters,
okay.
so self mutilation.
Yeah.
And I know that if you talk to some people, it's like, oh, you can't do that. That's so horrible. You don't do that. And I tell them, if that's your way of coping, everybody needs a way of cope. You go ahead and cope until you don't need
Mm,
to cope anymore, because it takes the shame away and it
yeah.
makes it a choice. It takes the label away, it takes the darkness away, and it's just like, oh, this is the thing that I'm doing. When really all the dark stuff we do, sometimes it's just out of ignorance. Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do not supposed to do that. Oh, I didn't
Okay.
know that was going to hurt. And you have to have the experience to gain that wisdom. So
Yeah.
when they approach it from a space of I'm coping, then it becomes not as fun anymore. And they
Mm.
just stop doing it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That resonates. So, many healers, they struggle with like carrying the weight of other people's pain. How can they hold space for others without losing themselves?
Oh, boundaries.
Oh, okay.
That's not really ever been a problem of mine. And lots of people say, how do you do what you do every day? But, people bring stuff in, but it doesn't stay. And
I
I'm not
like
taking
that.
it into my own energy bubble. I'm witnessing. There's a huge difference between witnessing and taking it on. So, one of the things I talk about with my clients is about uh, um, like proximity. Where do we stand in relation to other people? Because everything is a relationship. And there
Yes.
are people who hold other people up. There are people who stand on top of other people. There's people who are way out in front. There's people who are enmeshed, so there's no difference between them and you, and so you get all their stuff. I walk beside people as long as they want me to. So you're you, I'm me. I'm not holding you up. I'm not supporting you. You everything's under your own power, and you're sovereign, I'm sovereign. So none of that ever gets to be an issue.
Yeah. I agree about boundaries for sure, especially because, I like that you said you've never had an issue with boundaries, especially because, like you said, you have a background working in a maximum security prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you also said that things don't stay. Growing up as a highly sensitive person, it's like my aura was very much, you could stick things on it and it will stay. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
That's why I stress the importance of energetic hygiene.
Mhm.
But being a child or not knowing about those things, but growing and realizing, okay, people's projections are mine, people's insecurities are mine, the expectations are mine. What is mine? What is in mine? Drop it, clear it.
Mhm.
So yes, I do agree about boundaries. And I must say, boundaries are actually the sexiest thing ever, especially as
Yeah.
an energy healer. Being able to be like, nope, this is not for me. Oh my goodness. I wish they told me about it earlier because But yeah, I totally agree with what she said. Okay, so if you could leave listeners with one powerful insight on navigating ego death, healing journey, shadow work, anything, what would it be?
I would just hope that everybody can understand that the foundation of all of this is mindfulness,
Okay.
because the lens that you see the world through determines your reality. And if you're mindful, then your lens is going to be clear. So if
Hmm.
you don't have a mindfulness practice, I would find one and cultivate that daily, because there's so many distractions and so many people with so many opinions, and we all have the fears of, not being good enough, not having the right opinions, and all of these things. And when you're mindful, all of that goes away. But it is
Definitely.
something that has to be cultivated and practiced.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. And just an extra question. What would you advise for people that try to avoid feeling their feelings?
Experience your feelings. So do some somatic work, something. Be in
Mm,
touch with your body, and the experience of feeling consciously,
mm,
without
mm.
running away, without pushing anything away, with just allowing it to be, ends up being comfortable and
Okay.
sometimes even thrilling, because you're like, wow, my body is so amazing and it's telling me all of these things. And I had no idea what a wonderful resource it is. So I do somatic work too. And a lot of people have no idea. They're just so totally dissociated. It takes a while to get in their bodies. But once they are, it becomes like their favorite thing just to do a body scan. Oh, what am I feeling? Oh, I'm triggered, because as soon as we get triggered, we're outside our bodies. We're
Yeah,
time
true.
traveling. And so once you realize, oh, I'm triggered, and then you say, let me get back in my body, now you can have the experience of the thing. And if you're doing it mindfully, that's a part of living clean too, because if you're living it mindfully and going through it in the moment, you never carry any of it away. So you don't end up accumulating garbage.
So true. I asked that because that's where I am in my own like healing journey or shadow work journey, realizing that I feel a lot. So I
Mhm.
found coping mechanisms to escape feeling.
Mhm.
But, because I'm also an astrology girly and we had an eclipse this morning, I was like, the main thing that's coming up for me is no longer avoiding feelings, allowing myself to sit with myself and feel these things that I've been avoiding. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Like, practice, that have that as a mindfulness practice, sitting with myself and scanning how I feel and letting
Mhm.
myself actually feel, because I'm a big feeler and I can definitely feel when I'm trying to avoid feeling some things
Yeah.
that are coming up with certain transits or whatever. But yes, that's why I asked, so thank you for that, because this conversation was very eye-opening and enlightening, and genuinely it touched many aspects of my journey that I didn't know that I needed like answers on. So thank you so much. Like, really interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing with us your wisdom. And I would love to have you on the podcast again.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Would you like to say anything else to the listeners before we leave?
Well, if anybody wants a community where this is the norm, and you want some people to practice your sovereignty, integrity, exploring possibilities. I know that sounds kind of vague, but we don't have safe spaces to do that. So basically, what I'm
Mm.
saying is where you don't have to wear a mask,
Oh,
and you can
nice.
find out, who am I really? I do have a private group. It's myfantasia.net, and that's really what we do there. It's a little bit wild sometimes. There's going to be some things you're like, what are these people saying? It's because we do encourage creativity, individual thought, and it's not like there's no political agenda or anything like that. We're
Mm.
not trying to indoctrinate anybody in anything, but we do entertain ideas, because who knows? We were talking about the black sheep. That black sheep wild idea might be the path to go down, but you don't know if you don't
Ooh.
entertain the idea. So that's the group. If anybody wants to join us there, it's free.
Lovely. That sounds very good. I'll definitely check it out.
Sure.
So thank you so much, Laura, for joining me once again. A wonderful conversation that I found very enlightening and empowering. And it was lovely to be able to like deep our feet into the dark and talk about shadow work and all these things that people may try to avoid. So once again, I would like you to join us another time. But till then, we'll say thank you and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye.